gotta keep them separated. Separated.
Live from Michigan International 6 on one very, very hot day. Hello and welcome. I'm Paul Page. We've got some great stories for you here on a brand new repaved track. It's gorgeous. But before we go ahead, let's take you back 1 week to the race at Cleveland, because there's still a lot of anger over that one. And as a result of some of the actions in that race, and in fact in the season, there's been some penalties assessed for driving errors throughout the season. Michael Andretti is now on probation for the rest of the season. And for that little stunt after the checkered flag when Robbie Gordon drifted over into Michael, well, he's been fined $10,000 and he's on probation until the end of this season. So that wraps up the race at Cleveland. Now the Michigan 500. This is always a fascinating race. And in fact, there's always some history that goes on here. And we certainly have had that this weekend. On the pole, Firestone tires, first time since right here in 1974. A Honda engine, first time ever. And this gentleman, Parker Johnstone, who has never started on an oval.
What a great day. God has really smiled on us this weekend. I've been with Honda now for 11 years and the Comtech crew for 10. What a great debut for oval racing. I think the fans are going to have a great race. Certainly the drivers are going to have a chess game at 230 miles an hour. What a fantastic event.
Yeah, but what about this heat?
Heat? Well, I tell you, in Central Oregon on the ranch where I live, you dig enough post holes in a day, this is nothing.
All right, Parker Johnstone starts her on the pole. Now, let's take a look at this points fight, because it's really become fascinating. Jacques Villeneuve, of course, has a very long lead in the points over Bobby Rahal. Robbie Gordon won't score any points today because he's not going to race today. But Jacques Villeneuve still is chasing that championship. And right now, Jacques Villeneuve is over with Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, Jacques Villeneuve is the winner of the other 500-mile race. Of course, that one coming at Indy. And, Jacques, the question that begs to be asked is, your win there, how has it affected the way you're going to run this Michigan 500?
Oh, it's going to be very different. First of all, in Indy, we lost 2 laps on that first pit stop when they took it away. So, you know, we had to be pretty aggressive to come back up. Where now we're leading the championship. This is a race where in the past, there's been a lot of engines blown, so it's really important to, you know, take it easy and be there at the end to make what points you can and think about the championship.
Points so very important to this young man. Gary Gerald?
And we're with Michael Andretti. Michael, this has suddenly become a drafting game here in the Michigan 500. Is that going to make this race totally different than the 500 you've run here in the past?
I think it's going to be similar to what we were able to run back in like 1990, 91, where you would see a couple lead changes per lap when the track was a little smoother back then, and I believe it's going to be a lot like that.
Now, you've been handed the probation as the aftermath of the last race last week in Cleveland, and I know you're not happy about that. Will that impact your driving style at all today?
No, I mean, just go out and do what I always do. You know, this place, nobody takes any risks at all. If you do, you're not too smart. So, you know, it's just it's a long race, and you just want to be there at the end. And if you do something, you make a big mistake, it could have cost you.
Thanks, Michael. Paul?
Well, we've already mentioned Robbie Gordon's week has not been great. He's not running here today, and the reason is an accident in practice on Friday. He broke a lower wishbone in the rear suspension of his car, hit the wall at 116 Gs, and the doctor said he can't run here. Yesterday, we talked with him.
Now, you brought along an interesting piece of information here, a note from the neurologist who cared for you at the Jackson Hospital, and according to him, he thinks everything is fine and there should be no restriction placed on you. But I guess in this instance, the IndyCar doctors have the overriding decision.
Well, they do. You know, there's a rule in CART that says if you get knocked out on a race weekend, you're not able to come back and race that weekend. That there's a 7-day minimum. You know, fortunately, we have a weekend off next weekend, and I'll be back at Mid-Ohio.
How much does it hurt your still remaining championship hopes?
It just kills our championship hopes. You know, it's going to be really tough to make up 38 points in 4 races.
In fact, it's so frustrating for Robbie Gordon that he's not even at the track here today. In the center of the front row, they're going to start rows of 3 here today. Teo Fabi. Teo, 1983. You were a rookie pole sitter here. Did you have any advice for Parker Johnstone?
Well, it's maybe the first pole for Parker in an IndyCar, but he's a very experienced driver, so I don't expect any problem at the start of the race.
And what about your effort? The new pavement, the car's been consistent.
The car has been very fast the whole season, but we have to win our first race yet. And I think today we have a good chance because the car is very strong. But it's going to be a very, very fast race. And if you want to win this race, I think you have to run fast from the first lap.
All right, Teo Fabi starts from the center of the front row. Another story here today is that of Jimmy Vasser. Let's go to Jack Arute.
Well, Jimmy Vasser off a win at Portland, and then last week a strong third-place finish. You're starting to be spoken about as a potential winner here in the 500. What are your major concerns?
Well, obviously, you know, making it to the finish, it's a very long and grueling race, and it's very hot today. It's going to be difficult on the car, and making sure my car works good in traffic. I think the guy who has the best car in traffic and dirty air is going to have a good chance of winning today if it makes it to the finish.
Paul, everybody's talking about drafting.
Well, drafting very definitely going to be a factor on this beautifully smooth track here today. Well, the Michigan 500 is coming up, and when we come back, Jack Arute has a very special look at the current points leader, and we've got some other great stories for you. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Michigan International Speedway, where the skies are blue and the weather is hot, 95 degrees. This track is traditionally the fastest of all the tracks on which the Indy cars run. And Bobby, it has recently been repaved, as Paul said, and some of the drivers are calling it as smooth as glass.
Well, it is, Sam, but that equates to 3 to 5 miles an hour around this track. Now, this has caused the officials to want to slow the speed down, so what they did is cut the turbocharger boost from 45 inches down to 40 inches. This was about 75 to 100 horsepower. That's what they've done to slow them.
Well, some people might think that if the engines produce less horsepower, they must necessarily be more reliable. That's not the case.
Well, the reason is they, in order to get back some of this speed, they turn more RPM. They're turning over 14,000 on a couple of these engines, 13 highs, 13s on a lot of them. And so what they're doing for the race in order to make them last 500 miles, they have what we call an overdrive, a bigger split than they normally have. This will let the engines turn less RPM for the long race.
Bobby, what about the heat? Parker Johnstone said it wasn't going to bother him. I don't think.
It's going to bother everybody. It's hot today, 95 degrees hot, but the drivers won't be so bad because they have a lot of air going through the cockpit. The guys that are going to have trouble is the mechanics right down the pit. There's not hardly any air circulating down there. It's like you're in a soak tub down there.
Well, we've got an announcer down there in the pits, Gary Gerald. Gary?
Sam, it is hot, but no matter the heat. When you come to 500-mile races, a special air of anticipation. And remember, the last super speedway race, Indianapolis, this young man from 2 laps down to get the Indy 500 win, Jacques Villeneuve, getting ready now. He's leading the point standing. This season has been just like a Hollywood script. With more, here's Jack Arute.
Success dreamed of by the child is earned by the young adult. But Jacques Villeneuve denies personal accomplishment. For him, it's a team thing.
Well, I was born in Montreal, near Montreal in Canada. And I grew up in Monaco while my father was alive, following his career. And after that, I grew up in a boarding school in Switzerland. I got into racing because I've always wanted to race. I've always loved speed, risk, being on an edge.
Jacques was only 11 when his father Gilles died in a terrifying crash, but there are memories.
You know, I'm really proud to be his son. He's accomplished a lot in motor racing. He's a legend, basically. I don't know if a young gun is a lack of intimidation.
It may have been an absence of intimidation, personal drive, and self-promotion, which quickly moved him through Formula 3, Atlantics, and into Indy cars.
Every year I went up, it took a little while to adapt to the power, to the speed. But once you adapt to that and you're relaxed inside a race car, it feels like any other type of series. It's only that this one is very competitive. To me, it's not a choice between F1 and IndyCar, it's a choice between teams.
Forget the legacy. How does he pronounce his name?
Jacques Villeneuve.
Yeah, now I got it. I got it, I think. But when we come back, we'll be ready for the start of the Michigan 500, and we'll take a look at the starting lineup on this very, very hot day. Well, the grandstands are full, the engines are started, and we're very close to the green flag in the Michigan 500. So let's take a look at the starting field. On the pole is Parker Johnstone. In only his 10th start, the rookie qualified nearly 2 miles an hour faster than the field. In the center of the row, Teo Fabi. 2 of his career wins have come on ovals. And on the outside is Michael Andretti. He's the only 2-time winner in today's field. In the second row, Jacques Villeneuve. He won last week at Cleveland. And in the only other 500-mile race this year at Indy. The center is Jimmy Vasser, the Portland winner, making his second start here at Michigan. Outside is Mauricio Guzman, Big Mo. He was leading at the halfway point at the Indy 500. In row 3, it's Brian Herta coming off a career-best second-place finish last week at Cleveland. Paul Tracy is in the center of the third row. One of his 2 wins this year came on the oval at Milwaukee. Outside is Danny Sullivan, the winner here in 1988. In the fourth row, Andre Ribeiro. He's running the same Honda engine that sits on the pole. In the center is Adrian Fernandez, who has scored points in the last 6 races in a row. And outside is Scott Pruitt. The last win for Firestone Tires came here in 1974, and Pruitt's racing on him. In row 5, Al Unser Jr., the winner of the fastest 500-mile race ever here in 1990. In the center is Raul Boisel and Jill DeFerrin. In row 6, Bobby Rahal, Emerson Fittipaldi, who scored his first IndyCar victory here 10 years ago, and outside is Eddie Cheever. In the 7th row, Carlos Guerrero, Buddy Lazier, and Stefan Johansson. In row 8, Lynn St. James, away from her announcer duties, back behind the wheel. Eliseo Salazar is in the center of the row, and outside is Alessandro Zampedri. In the 9th row, 2 cars, Christian Fittipaldi and Hiro Matsushita. We already mentioned to you that Robbie Gordon's car has been withdrawn. He will not start here today. So on the line, 250 laps, 5 miles, a 2-mile high bank speedway. Fuel stops come about every 34 laps or so. And in the Nations Cup battle, the United States continues to dominate over Canada and Brazil. And that one will go down to the end of the year, no question about that. In today's field, mostly Renards. There's the engines and the tires. And in the Manufacturers' Championship now, Ford Cosworth still pulling ahead of Mercedes-Benz. Now the crowd on their feet, waving them on. Let's go pit side before the start in Jackaroo.
Well, Paul, just about 4 hours ago, Rick Mears, the multi-500-mile champion who has since retired from IndyCar competition, moseyed over to Parker Johnstone's pit area and had a half-hour conversation with Parker Johnstone. The whole conversation centered upon 2 things: how to start this race and how to stay out of trouble. Afterwards, Parker Johnstone said, "I believe I've got exactly the advice that I need." Gary?
We're in Parker Johnstone's pit, and the crew has just learned from engineers who monitor track temperatures 138 degrees as we await the start of this race. That's the surface temperature of this 2-mile oval. We've talked about the stresses, the loads on the suspension in these cars in the past. The bumps are gone. It's going to be sensational racing, but it is so very, very hot. You wonder what toll that may take on equipment and driver before this afternoon is over.
And right there is just the perfect picture to show you how beautifully smooth this repaved track is. The drivers say it's like glass, as Bobby Unser suggested, and that could make for one incredibly fast race. The fastest 500 ever was run here. Will it be faster here today? Take a look at a couple of the onboards we've got for you. This is for Michael Andretti. He'll start outside the front row. Paul Tracy is a bit back in the field in 8th starting position. And Bobby Rahal, of course, we have that camera mounted right on the nose of his car, starts back in 16th position. And Stefan Johansson a little further back in 21st. Again, the camera is right there on the nose of the car. Brian Herta's car. Now we've got a good set of cameras on his car as well. And then Scott Pruitt. So plenty of onboard cameras to show you here today. Should make for one exciting afternoon. Remember, the onboard cameras last year captured the tire exploding on Robbie Gordon's car live right as it was happening. Those onboard cameras are terrific. Look at the crowd, just gigantic here today. In the pits, the teams are all ready as they are now on the pace lap. And Bobby, the heat here today, heard it mentioned several times, It'll affect the drivers, but it'll affect those machines much, much more. What about the tires with that surface temperature?
Paul, that's what I was just poking you for. I wanted to tell you the tires are going to take the most views of everything today other than guys in the pit. The tires, remember, it's the sun shining on the track. That's what causes the top surface to get really hot, and that's the part that affects the tires.
All right, it's rows of 3 here for the Michigan 500. Pole sitter, rookie, first time on an oval, Parker Johnstone. Awesome responsibility, but he is a veteran racer, and everyone seems to have good confidence in him. The pace picks up as they come off of turn 4. We watch for the green flag. Parker lags back just a bit, and it's a non-start. They'll start counting laps. But what they're really looking for is to see the pole sitter cross the line first, and Jacques Villeneuve looked like he was cruising right up there.
Yeah, Villeneuve was sneaking up on that. Now, they'll only let him do this the next time. If he does that again, they'll just put him to the back of the pack. So they'll be watching for that. Wally Dallenbeck's, that's not too far from us here, looking at the same thing we are.
Jim Swintal, the starter for the Indy cars, very conscientious about those starts. Has a long conversation with the front row, tells them where he will most likely go green and what he would like to see the alignment. And one thing is he always wants to see that pole car head for the line first.
Another thing to realize is it's not important who leads the first turn of the first lap of this. This really is a long race at 500 miles.
All right, off the 4th turn again. Will they start him this time? Still straggled a bit, but at least Parker Johnstone is out in front. But
no,
says, nope, not gonna do it like that.
What was Fabi doing down there?
Well, Sam, that was that Johnstone just really jumped it. Now he thought maybe he hadn't done right before. Remember, this is the first time that he's ever been on an oval or on the pole.
But why, Bobby, did Fabi, and you'll see it here.
Because he was way ahead of him. And why not get behind? If they do throw the green, he needs to pick up a draft so he can stay with him so the other guys don't pass him, you see?
Now remember, because of fuel, these laps under the yellow do in fact count. So if we get green this time, it'll actually be at the conclusion of the 2nd lap. I'm not so sure, Bobby, you can really hang that on Parker when other guys are maneuvering quite the way they are. Here we come. Turn number 4, the move again. Front row kind of a line, and again Teo Fabi drops down, but this time it's going to go green. And here we go, 4, 5 wide into the first turn. Parker Johnstone leads them through 1. Teo Fabi runs up high. Michael Andretti drops into 3rd. Villeneuve 4th. Jimmy Vasser is 5th. They're still spread out fairly wide coming onto the backstretch.
Remember, there goes Fabi down the inside trying Parker Johnstone. Remember that most of the practice laps here have been done with the cars running by themselves. This is the first time they've been bunched together, Paul.
Coming for the line, Parker Johnstone leads the first lap of racing. He'll be scored with 3 laps into the record book. Teo Fabi in 2nd place, then Michael, then Jacques Villeneuve, then Jimmy Vasser. Mauricio Gugelmin is 6th, followed by Paul Tracy, Brian Herta, Andrew Ribeiro, and Danny Sullivan.
Now, the important thing for all of these guys, what they're doing right now is trying to see what will win. They've never had this many cars, as you mentioned, on the track at one time. So they're trying to see how the drafting and how the guys alongside them are affecting their race cars.
Right now, there is no prevailing breeze. You can see the trees at the top of the screen. Everything is dead calm.
Jimmy Vasser runs in 5th place, chasing Jacques Villeneuve. They've strung out as they all start to look for racing room. And I think Bobby trying to find out what kind of grooves are available out there.
Yes, and they're going to find out that this track, being all new, the groove is wherever you want it to be. As we saw in the IROC race yesterday, you can just run on the bottom or you can run on the top. And that's what these guys are going to figure out by the time they run 500 miles. As we saw Parker Johnstone a little while ago, he was absolutely right down on the white line and still was leading.
Looking back now to the battle, 4th, 5th, and 6th. Villeneuve, Vasser, Paul Tracy. Tracy closing up on Vasser.
You see Villeneuve there in the blue car just coming by. It's not unusual for him not to lead. Remember, he has a commanding lead in the championship, but he rarely leads the races from the beginning. He has a very cautious approach to the first laps.
Paul Tracy on the charge, closing on Jimmy Vasser.
It's amazing, Paul. I talked to a lot of the drivers the last couple of days and the team owners, and they realize that often there are not very many cars finished.
Whoa, car into the wall. That's Carlos Guerrero. So we're yellow. By the way, Eliseo Salazar jumped up 5 positions in the first couple of laps.
And by the way, look at the extent of the damage. This track, when it strikes big. That car's torn up bad.
Keeping an eye on Guerrero to make sure he is all right as well. Fairly still in the cockpit as Parker Johnstone slows down and comes by. The IndyCar safety crews are already there, each a specialist in either extrication or medical or fire.
Now, he obviously went into the turn backwards. Somehow or another, there was a spin. You can see that's the left side. Took all the brunt of the damage. The tire and the wheel suspension. That piece on the right is the right rear hub assembly. The uprights and all of that together, separated from the wheel.
And he's okay. There's some well, he's at least capable of climbing out.
Which Robbie Gordon 2 days ago was not. So it's good to see movement.
So as Carlos Guerrero steps over the debris of his wrecked race car, one Lola is junk right now, and we have our first racing yellow of the day on lap 6. Still under yellow at Michigan, floating overhead, one of America's most enduring corporate symbols, the Goodyear blimp. The Spirit of Akron is providing us with an aerial view of the track and the surrounding Irish hills of Michigan, a truly beautiful area. The yellow is out because of the accident involving Carlos Guerrero. He climbed out of the car. We'll update his condition here shortly. PPG, the major sponsor of the IndyCar World Series, prominently displays its pace car team at each race. Its fleet of 30 cars are used beyond just entertainment.
Well, the pace car team is made up of 14 professional female drivers who race in other circuits, and they drive our special PPG pace cars, of which there are about 30 in the fleet right now. The pace car program was designed basically for 3 reasons. First of all, to help the OEM manufacturers showcase their new models and hopefully build sales of those models in the showrooms. Secondly, PPG uses it to showcase new colors that may be 3 and 4 years out and see what the public's acceptance of those new colors are. And also, we use the actual paint on the cars themselves for durability tests. We look at the stone chips and bruises and sun exposure, that sort of thing. And then finally, we use the cars for customer entertainment. If you're a PPG customer, you get to go on a pace car ride, which is something the typical race fan doesn't get to do.
PPG and the PPG pace car, Johnny Rutherford at the wheel, a long-term sponsor of the Indy cars. We'll be back after these messages and a word from our ABC stations. You ride under the yellow flag on the nose of Stefan Johansson's car. Tonight on ABC, it's an hour of America's Funniest Home Videos, followed by Lois and Clark, and then Rebecca De Mornay, Jill Eikenberry, Jason Robards, and Peter Gallagher star in an ABC miniseries event, An Inconvenient Woman. All tonight here on ABC. So still yellow here, so we've got some time. Let's go down to Gary Gerald.
Paul, you mentioned at the head of the show there was a very serious incident involving Robbie Gordon on Friday in practice when a failure in a suspension part in the left rear sent him into the wall. A tremendous hit left him unconscious for several minutes. He, of course, out of the hospital doing well. But because of that accident, it was determined that it was a failure of a part in the suspension. It was on a Reynard chassis, and so Bruce Ashmore and the designers at Reynard immediately tried to make a fix. This is the lower wishbone. This is the piece that was in question. It takes a tremendous stress here at 230-mile-per-hour speeds on these banks. They cut this piece out. They had a local manufacturer then make this bushing and this top piece here that is 90-ton steel as opposed to 50-ton steel that was used before. Greatly strengthened it. And as you can see, there are threads here. Instead of it being welded in, they now bolt this into this particular bushing, weld the bushing to a tube that runs all the way down with spot welds all the way down through this particular arm. It's on the lower left, and you say, why does it absorb all of the tension and the stress when the car leans to the right? Well, as it leans to the right, it pulls on that left side. And at these tremendous downforce and tremendous speeds, you have all of this stress. It led to the failure. It was a high-mileage part. It had 1,700 miles, so they made the fix. A couple of the drivers have that in their cars today. Other people have entirely new pieces trying to preclude what happened to Robbie Gordon. Jack?
Gary, let's try while we've got the luxury of some time for IndyCar engineering for dummies. Now, here's an Indy car without any of its rear wings or front wings. You see the large tires up front here. Well, these large tires, they create an excessive amount of drag. Believe it or not, the drag coefficient on many of the American passenger cars is far less than what is on an Indy car. So now when you're hurtling at speeds of over 220 miles an hour, engineers have to try and adjust the downforce on the car. The more downforce that's created by the front wings and the rear wings, the more drag that it's created and the less speed that you're able to get for the amount of horsepower you have. So what engineers do is they run a knife edge balance. They try to take as much downforce out of the car before a driver can no longer drive it. Why? Because they want the top speed. So when you hear a driver talking about his car being balanced, that means for that particular track, he's got it exactly the way he wants it. The coefficient between downforce and speed is exactly perfect, Paul.
So, with rain tires, no wing, and no nose. Now, I don't think I'd drive that car. They're still trying to clean this track up. We're under yellow after Carlos Guerrero's accident, and we'll be back. Back with just about one lap to go before we go back to green flag racing. Parker Johnstone, leading an IndyCar race for the first time in his career, has now led 15 laps, and good moves. Salazar from 23rd to 20th, Eddie Cheever from 18th to 15th, Paul Tracy from 8th up to 6th, and Andre Ribeiro from 10th up to 8th. So in those first couple of laps of speed, we have seen some action. Now, one thing we're going to be able to do is listen in on the two-way communication with Scott Pruitt. You'll be hearing the voices of Scott Pruitt and perhaps a little clearer that of Jim McGee, the team manager for Patrick Racing.
12 o'clock at the fuel, Scott, 12 o'clock.
That was the voice of McGee. And there is Scott Pruitt on the track. He currently runs 11. Bobby?
I didn't hear that good enough to get that. It's 12 o'clock. I don't know what he meant.
That's the adjustment of the fuel dial. It's probably adjusted straight up.
All right, we're ready to go green once again.
Green.
And that's how they tell. In case they're not looking ahead, Parker Johnstone takes the lead, but take a look at Teo Fabi as he now begins to close in. He's going to try a low move on Parker. Parker comes across the front and pulls away.
And yeah, what I just wanted to tell you that what it means, the reason they say green, 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 because on a restart, as soon as it goes green, I don't care if they're on the back straightaway, they can start passing, and that's really important.
Boy, take a look at Michael, who is on the fly as he just screams past Teo Fabi and picks up second place.
3 different engines, the Honda engine of Parker Johnstone out front, but you just saw the power of the new Ford Cosworth engine in Michael's car breezed by the more normal engine on Fabi's.
Back on Paul Tracy's car right now. He runs 6th, but he begins to challenge Jimmy Vasser just ahead. That blue car, that's Jack Villeneuve.
And let's keep in mind, these cars are like flywheels. It takes a while to get the speed up, and that's the reason you see it passing sometimes.
Oh, look at this. The Honda power of Andre Ribeiro really paying off on the backstretch.
Talk about
it. Just cuts right on past Paul Tracy.
Talk about a difference in engine power. Both Hondas are really moving. Here comes Ribeiro setting up another Ford engine. The Ford engine in Vasser's car. Watch him.
Fernandez, Pruitt, and Al Unser Jr. were all able to get past Herta on the restart, and that brings them up into the top 10. Fernandez still on the move there. Back to the fight, Jimmy Vasser, Andre Ribeiro. Fight for 6th place, Bobby.
The Honda will no doubt have more power than the Fords do. It's been running that and showing that here. But it's not pass them as easy. You have to remember, it's a flywheel thing here. In order for everybody to get equal like they are now, it takes about 2 to 3 laps to get this flywheel going in full swing. And it's because they have less boost, less horsepower. The aerodynamics are really what's working more on these cars than the horsepower is.
Looking back at Scott Pruitt as he tries to do everything he can to get up into the front and into this fight.
You can see how wide the grooves are. You know, they don't, everybody was talking about when they first got here that the new track, new pavement rather on it, it was going to be a 1-groove track. Well, already you can see, we've seen 3 grooves wide already with almost 25 cars doing it. You can see Scott right now, he's all over the place.
Pruitt working on the Gallus driver, Adrian Fernandez.
Just put yourself for a second in Pruitt's place. The tension, I mean, things seem to be happening in slow motion. Remember, they're going 230 miles an hour. Anything that goes wrong at this speed could be catastrophic.
We'll ride with Scott Pruitt. He is 10th He makes the move on Adrian Fernandez.
Now what happens there is Adrian was running low, thinking that he was going to block Scott. This racetrack, because of the grooves being so wide. There's
Jacques Villeneuve comes off and into the pits.
That's unscheduled, Paul.
Oh, absolutely. 22 laps into the book. This could mean trouble for the points leader.
And he's going too slow. He's got some sort of a problem. He's going way too slow coming in.
Green team is right there, and the IndyCar officials are saying, hold it, we've seen something here.
That's the crew guys saying they found some sort of a problem right there with his hand in the air.
Something in the right rear. Suspension, we're talking a Renard. A wheel bearing, what could this possibly be? But before you answer that, whatever it is, it may speak once again to the toughness of Michigan.
Well, it's definitely in the right rear. Everybody's seeing something right in the right rear. I can see smoke coming back there a little bit too, Paul, so he's probably got a bearing in the upright that's gone.
That would be only his second breakdown in the last 9 races.
Let's go to Jack Arute.
Well, we're showing you the rear hub that they're going to pull out and put on the right side of the car, Paul. So definitely this is going to be a long stop for your point leader.
Now there's the upright right there. That's what Jack's referring to as the hub. Now most likely the part that's gone bad is the bearings inside to keep the whole thing together.
You say, Jack Arute, any idea, Jack, on the hub, what might be the problem? Wheel bearing, a connection, what is it?
Well, right now, Paul, they're really not going to discern what the problem is. It's easier just to change it and get them back out there.
The reason, of course, they'll put this work in is this race is notorious as being one where people break down. You could spend 10, 15 laps in the pits right now and still finish in the first 5 at the end of this day.
Another thing you have to worry about, Sam and Paul and Jack, is when they put those things back on, they don't get aligned as good as they were when he started the race.
All right, Michael Andretti, who is third, but he's dropped way back. Listen to that engine. What is that?
A little bit of back off. He backed off just for a minute there, or he could have popped a gear shifter. Remember, they told you they have 2 gears that they race with. One of them to get rolling with that they'll use certainly after the restart, and the other one is what they call the cruise gear, like the overdrive in a car.
Well, I buy the gear change, Bobby, because I don't think he'd have backed off at that point on the track.
Yeah, but look at this. Michael comes off the corner low. That's Paul Tracy closing in on him. And Michael, for the most part, just lets Tracy cruise on past. Are we going to see Michael Andretti in the pits shortly? He's staying out right now.
Here comes Ribeiro there. He's shooting right by him. No effort.
Oh, whatever it is a problem now.